Welcome to AI for that. We're here with David Kohnstamm, founder of Leaf Cloud, and excited to talk to you today. David,
Thanks for having me, Jack.
yeah, I'm thrilled that you're here. This is not the first startup you've been a part of, but it's the first one that you've founded. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. I used to work at a startup that did something very similar.
Right. And I imagine that can be quite a helpful experience of that startup didn't work out. What did you learn? What was frustrating there? What didn't work that you're taking into Leaf Cloud to try and do differently with hopefully a different outcome?
I think the basic of it is that they were trying to do something fully from the intrinsic mindset of wanting to do a really good version of cloud, as in really green, not only really sustainable but also really ethical. Um, but trying to get there in a way that is simply not feasible by doing the 100% in one go. And um, it's frustrating because it comes from a good place, but then it doesn't work out because reality doesn't work like that. You have to sort of make choices that are, the 80/20 style, good enough, much better than what the rest of the market is doing, but still not 100% as green as possible. And trying to build a company with like all of that in mind is very hard. And I think that's what really stopped them. And that was frustrating.
Yeah, so it comes from a good place, but if it doesn't go anywhere, like,
No,
doesn't that good place doesn't amount to anything. You'd
no,
rather,
no, you don't reach it, so therefore you don't even do the good thing you're trying to do. Yeah.
yeah. What are some specific examples where you found as you're building Leaf Cloud, like, okay, I'm not going to go 100% of to what my ideal is, but I'm going to do what seems to be the limit of the possibility right now for sake of the bigger vision.
Yeah, so one of the main things was we stopped developing or we didn't develop any of our own hardware. Um, as a cloud provider, that is a choice. It's not something you have to do. And because of that, we actually managed to do the things greener and faster, which was nice. Some parts where we didn't really go the full 100%, stuff like starting with the metering for your heat reuse completely set up from the beginning, um, not building our own software stack for a large part of it, but just using off-the-shelf components for that. That is like it was good enough, but it's not as good as it could be, right? And that's I think all the time the balancing act that you have to do in starting a scale up, and especially one as complex as this with limited funds.
So I want to rewind a little bit. I have a bit of background on Leaf Cloud, but just give us an overview. What is it? What are you solving for? And what are you building to solve for that?
Yeah. Well, basically, the software in the world amounts about 6% of the world's emissions. And this was a figure from before AI. Now we have lots of people saying it's going to be much more due to AI. And basically, yeah, software runs in cloud and in data centers. And data centers are places that you put full of servers. They get hot, and then you use air conditioning to throw the heat away. And then the rest of the market says, yeah, but we bought green energy, for example, in Norway, and therefore my server is green. And I think, yeah, it's not that simple. If you put a box in a field and you put it full of servers and you throw the heat away, that part, that throwing the heat away, that still has to count for something. You put a space heater in a field and you give it green energy, it doesn't make for a green space heater. So what we were thinking of is why don't we actually use that waste heat of servers in order to deliver value to apartment complexes, swimming pools, hotels that need heat 24/7. And so the problem we solve on one end is the carbon footprint of cloud and the carbon footprint of cloud buyers. So large enterprises in Europe, they're often obliged to do CSRD and reduce their footprint. That's something we do a solution for. On the other hand, it is that cloud itself is a very expensive endeavor, partially due to running in data centers. Because we don't only run in data centers, you can run your workload inside our data center. That's an option. But you can also run a workload where the heat is needed, like those elderly homes. Um, and there we save a lot of money. Therefore, your cloud workload also gets cheaper. So it's a win-win in that sense. It is
Yeah. So it
better for
sounds like multi-pronged. You've
yeah,
got people, corporations need data centers. You're providing data centers. You are still using green energy uh, to provide electricity to the data centers. But the picture that was missing before is there's a lot of heat generated in those data centers. And instead of using more energy to cool that, you're actually harnessing the heat for places that need heat.
yes, exactly. With one small edit, we don't provide data centers. We provide data centers to ourselves. We sell cloud. So
Aha,
we don't
thank you.
have a data center product. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you provide the cloud. All right,
Yeah.
great. This makes so much sense. Why are more people not doing this?
I don't quite know. There are some people doing this gladly, but I think the majority of the answer lies in it's very hard to steer an accelerating oil tanker, and the cloud market as is 80% of it is in the hands of AWS, Microsoft, and Google,
Mm-hmm.
and they are growing at 20-30% compound annual growth rates already for the past 10 years plus. Um, so those guys are accelerating oil tankers. They're moving very fast in a certain direction, and their product, as it is with these very large public companies, is shareholder value. And if you're on board an accelerating oil tanker that's going faster and faster and growing, why would you steer it? It seems dangerous to steer accelerating oil tankers, and I think that's the core of the market. They are stuck within their current ways of doing it. There might be very smart people within Gugamasoft, as I call them, that might be able to that definitely thought of this as well.
Yeah,
Actually, doing that and implementing that is a risky endeavor. It's
right.
something,
So
therefore,
so the way that you're understanding it's a classic example of there's an established paradigm focused on executing an existing playbook. Innovating inside of that paradigm is very challenging because
yeah.
innovation comes with a whole different set of expectations, initial failures, creating a whole new playbook.
Or innovating and doing the same, like making the data center slightly more efficient. It's the same thing like the car industry before Tesla, right? It's everyone could have made an electric car. They just didn't.
Right,
And someone has to show the way that it is possible.
right, right. Um, so you had an experience of this not working out. You've made some changes in terms of how you're approaching the 80/20 good enough for now that's going to get us there. You're actually discovering that that's actually in some cases getting you even more effective, getting there even more effectively. Um, I wonder when you sort of swing to the other side, um, if if you feel like you've really found the balance, or now that you're starting to get some momentum, and I want to hear about the progress as
Mhm.
well. If there's a middle point that you feel like, all right, I'm going to come back to maybe there's some.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
a great question. I think that's always a swing, right? There's always a certain amount of complexity that you want to go, and then I mean I don't want to quote Elon too much because it's a bit of a crazy guy, but the 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 thing he said about like if eliminate your assumptions, and if you didn't add one back on later, then you didn't eliminate enough in the first place. I think that's so true, and that's something that yeah, of course, you find that year later you're like, okay, but maybe we should have done this this portal or this step
yeah,
in the beginning because now it's more work than it would have been. Of course, this stuff happens. I think we've We've completely, for example, eliminated having a workshop because we didn't do our own hardware. Now we really need a workshop again. So that's one of the things where we've eliminated too much.
What was it that like what were the pain points, the alarm bells going off that made you realize like, oh, okay, actually we need that.
Um, yeah, having a large GPU shipment being delivered to our door when we didn't have a place to store it, when it should have gone somewhere else.
All
That was
right. Very much like in your face, like you
I
get
don't want to have this millions of euros of hardware in my office, and it's
yeah,
not a place for it, and there is no spot for it. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. Um, I want to zoom out for a sec. Um, you're an engineer
yeah,
by training. Your first job though was as a bicycle mechanic.
exactly.
All right. Um, besides the fact that probably half of the people in Amsterdam could qualify as bicycle mechanics. Uh,
You'd be surprised how little people can do something on their bike here.
yeah, I would be surprised apparently, but maybe it's because the bicycles are so sophisticated. I don't know.
I mean, I'd say like you're from the States, right, Jack?
I am, yeah, from
How many
California.
people are car mechanics in the States?
Touche. Yeah,
I think that's one of the things that, in general, tends to portray to the rest of the world that we're a country of crazy bikers. The
yeah,
majority of us really doesn't care for biking.
really.
It is simply the fastest and most effective way to get somewhere, and it's cheap. Therefore, we use that. But it's just that we have so much good alternatives that makes it that people take the alternative, and I think that's
Yeah,
what the state's lacking is
yeah.
alternative.
So I'm wondering two things. So one is if if there are lessons from your career as a bike mechanic that you're applying in leading this startup now.
Yeah, I'd say so. For example, contact and care. Like, for example, if someone asks a simple action from me uh, that I could charge, I don't know, an hourly rate for, but it takes me a couple of minutes to do it, and I just do it anyway.
Hmm.
That little free help things on a personal level,
Yeah,
those things really get back to you, and that's one of the things you find in the bicycle industry, like pumping up someone's tire or adjusting the seat a bit. I've sold multiple bikes just on pumping someone's tires once, and then they come back and they're like, okay, but last time you helped very good, so can you help me with this? And then they're like, okay, this was really good as well. And then they're like, okay, well, I'll buy a bike. And this the same thing happens in cloud. People come back because of good service. So that's one.
that's huge.
I think the other one is bikes are a great example, and keep it simple, stupid. It's like a very delicate little intricate working together of very simple parts that make something very complex. And I think that mentality is good to have in this market because you can make it extremely complex very easily.
Yeah. And as a first time founder, what's different? What are some of the challenges that you faced as founder, as a leader? Either challenges that you've overcome and or challenges that you're still navigating at this stage of growth.
Yeah, yeah. I think it changed me a lot as a person. Um, I think everybody, in a way, has a sort of um, employee mentality when they first arrive in businesses, and I think that employee mentality good. I got totally rid of that. I don't think like I don't know how I'm gonna have to be if I have another job in the future. How I'm gonna have to be an employee again. I think that's gonna be a tough challenge.
How would you describe the employee mentality that you let go of?
I think like expecting other people to do things for you when you know that that's not their job and that's not the thing that like in a startup there's always jobs that in the end like no one should have that on their plate, but there's no one else to do it, so you end up doing it anyway. And that sort of mindset of expecting that things are arranged for you instead of at least trying to help in arranging it rather than expecting that. I think that's something that changed in me. the thing I'm forced to organize now. I'm not that good at organizing. Um, uh, so that's something I'm still trying to get better at. Yeah.
Um,
True.
that's a huge difference maker, especially as startups grow and want to go from more ad hoc ways of working to
Yeah.
systematic, organized ways of working. The degree of organization of the founder often gets reflected
Yeah,
in the rest of the organization.
for sure.
Um, and I'm curious about the first one, David, letting go of the employee mentality. I could imagine that having made that sort of crossed that chasm and coming into the founder owner mentality, it could be frustrating, or I imagine myself in that situation being very frustrated if I see my colleagues deep in their own employee mentality. I'm
Yeah,
wondering if you've seen that, if you see it now, how you're navigating that.
of course, there are situations where you walk into these things. It can get frustrating, but having worked for bad bosses in my bicycle mechanic years for quite some time, uh, I do understand very well what it takes and what needs to be said to sort of get people, or at least let people sort of slow land out of that, rather than fighting it,
Mm-hmm.
standing with it and trying to
Yeah,
absorb the blow and say, okay, but look, this is why.
yeah. What's an example? I like that term, and instead of fighting people, which is rarely successful, if ever, having them slow land. What's an example of you helping someone slow land out of that mentality?
I don't know if I can just off the cuff make an
Right,
example that it's going to be anonymized enough to to avoid conflict in the future.
right, right. Um,
I think that I could give an example, but if it's anonymized enough, I don't know.
that's your call.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to do that.
There's the founder mentality. I've got to go
Yeah,
back to work after this, and
yeah, yeah.
yeah, very good. Um, Maybe you can speak abstractly. And what's if you're coaching another founder who's dealing with the same thing, and you just say, "Listen, here's the one non-obvious thing to attend to when you're helping someone slow land out of."
I think the main thing was like one, for example, like if you're out and about for 3 days a week, going to events and going to speak to clients, going to talk to investors, and then the one day that you're at the office, someone turns out that's pissed because you didn't do something on Monday. And then because you haven't been there, but you've been extremely busy. You went to events, you went around the country to go to clients, to go to investors, you did a lot. But you weren't at the office, right? And the people around you didn't see you do that job. So really explaining what you did in those past days,
Mm,
why it was heavy for you, like like just explaining that my wife was complaining yesterday that I wasn't there, while at the same time they were complaining that I didn't do something for them. Like just sort of explaining your point of view, that already helps a lot.
mhm.
Quietly, yeah, letting people know that there was really nothing, not too much you could have done about it. And if you can do something about it, admit that, of course. Um, I think that tends to help a lot.
Yeah. What strikes me about that is so much of our work in general, but especially as a leader, so much of your work can be invisible to the rest of
Yeah.
the team. You're not writing code. You're not you're not putting the servers together yourself.
No.
Uh, and so people, especially people who have only been employees, they wonder, what does he do all day? I don't see him. I'm doing the work.
Yeah.
And so if you don't pull back the curtain and share with them what you've been
And
doing.
sometimes even more difficult stuff you can't even share.
Right, right. Yeah. So there's a sort of big black box that you're operating in, and that leaves it up to their stories and making
Yeah.
up their narrative.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point. You just hook their stories. Like people can make things very big in their head when you
Yeah,
simply haven't responded because you didn't have time.
yeah,
You know,
totally.
and, and that's something you really have to respect. Like
I
what?
often say to clients, if you don't give them a story for what you're doing or not doing, they will create their own.
Yeah,
Um,
and that's probably worse than the real one. Yeah.
yeah. Um, One of the things that I love doing in the past year or so with clients is helping them use AI in their leadership. You know, there's so many principles, practices that have been around for decades. This one hasn't, and it can be a real amplifier. Of course, not just for leaders, for everyone. I'm curious how you're seeing that show up in your work, what you're leveraging yourself, what your team's leveraging.
Yeah, I mean, in a startup, there are many frustrating moments, and then you tend to write your frustrated email, and then what I used to do is let that simmer and then check it the next day again. Well, actually, I'm lying. Before that, I used to just press enter and send it. Uh,
I'll meet your frustration and raise you one.
yeah, yeah. And nowadays, I write my frustrated email and then I ask an AI to sort of tone it down and see if I can keep the same message without sounding so pissed off. And I just like don't usually use that email, but just the ideation I get from that of how you can avoid getting a frustrated email and how that just all of a sudden sounds like a totally normal email, even though you're saying exactly the same. That is very valuable in learning to filter out some of the uh, frustrations. That helps a lot. What I see in the team is, yeah, IT engineers aren't known to be the most delicate of types. So, so nowadays we do get like most of our engineers tend to write email just directly off an AI these days, and then you get engineers writing emotionally balanced emails all of a sudden, and that's funny to see, and it does help.
Yeah. When you get that, as you notice that, what impacts do you notice in yourself in response or in the team to that kind of enhanced communication?
I think it depends a bit on who's the receiving end. For me, like you usually see it that they do it, but like I really respect it because I know like it's stuff that if you're not really good at it, at making a good, like friendly sounding, supporting email to your client, then it's very welcome to see that. I have one engineer in Egypt who used to be very short, just very direct, just the answer, that's it. And now he uses a different style, and it does matter a lot in terms of how clients receive him as. Is he's just as knowledgeable as he was before? People just think he's more knowledgeable now.
This has given me so many ideas. There's one of the things I spend a lot of time working with, not just founders on, but with their teams on, is giving each other feedback so that they can grow. When people really internalize that, as they often do, that's great. But there's also a takeaway that I hadn't thought about before, which is if you get some feedback about a growth area, your communication, say, you could also take the essence of that feedback
In
and
your
just
prompt.
and put it into your prompt.
Yeah.
They're saying I need to work on this. I recognize that. Into the prompt, here's the output. And even as I do that, I'm getting exposed to the kind of communication that ostensibly I want to be practicing.
And people always take it very far, like you have to use that output correctly. No, I don't think it should work like that. It's just a tool to help you write
Right.
things better. And
Yeah, starting place.
just having the ideation of that is already valuable.
Yeah. I think the point you made in your own example too of, just the ability to express the emotion that comes out in me when I'm receiving an email or whatever, whether there's no one else in the room or not, getting it out and expressing it and essentially having the conversation is a way for me to work through the emotion. And sometimes there's a communication that comes out of that. Sometimes it's just I've done my own work and I realize actually that was all that needed to happen.
Yeah, you just needed to talk about it for a second.
Yeah.
That's something that also happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's this premise I have that the most important conversation when it comes to difficult conversations is the one that I have with myself.
Yeah.
Now I just got a really helpful tool to go into that conversation with.
Yeah, in a way, you almost have a conversation with someone else. Just it helps you put things in a different perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. This falls into the category of something I'm very excited about, which is a lot of people are scared, perhaps rightfully so, about AI replacing human relationships. And I'm of the mind that there's this enormous possibility that we're speaking to here, which is that AI can actually really deepen human relationships and expand interpersonal skills. So that the fear doesn't actually have to play out. We can go, in fact, in the opposite direction of expanding uniquely human interaction.
I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent, but it feels to me like every example that people use against AI can also be used against the book press.
Yeah.
And this is another one of us, right? Like books are going to make sure that we're never need to communicate because everybody just keeps reading books. And now we say books are a super valuable tool to learn from. Really valid way of learning someone else's point of view. And so I think in a way that is the same thing here.
Right. That's a great parallel. And sort of any introduction of new technology, their fears of where it will take us.
Yeah, especially once as impactful as the book press and AI, right? Those two, I think the analogy goes a long way in both ways, right? It takes jobs, it increases communication, it increases the availability of expertise. Both do that. So there's so much analogs there.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the potential for learning. If books aren't widely available, the potential for learning is really limited. The potential for learning now with your own personalized learning tutor is unparalleled.
Yeah, and that's the sort of Western point of view of these things always is like, yeah, but there is no issue with availability of experts. Wait, for most of the world, availability of experts is a massive issue. And getting any sort of expertise on anything complex or technical is extremely costly in most of the world, but not in the West.
Yeah. So zooming back into Leaf Cloud, I want to know where are you guys at right now in your scale journey? How many members on the team? How many data centers do you have deployed? Tell us where you are.
We have a team of about 20 people, about 300 paying customers, from very small to bigger. We currently have one data center where we have 3 sites around. We're busy building a 4th site around that and a new core somewhere else. So we have our cores redundant as well. We are trying to get large-scale customers. That part is a bit harder than we'd hoped. But enterprise clients, this is a complex sort of purchasing process. I think cloud is one of the more complex purchasing processes there is. But mostly the sort of 200 men strong DevOps-led companies or developer-led companies, those are easy. Like they have developers that make the choice, or DevOps guys that make their own choice on which cloud provider they run on. That is properly doable because we have cool story, use open source technology, are much greener and much more affordable. So with them it works. With enterprise, it's a bit tougher. We do get success there, but it's really like, yeah, that market is sort of stuck in with their own CIOs saying, yeah, but it needs to be exactly the same as AWS. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have 8 billion for a European cloud.
Yeah. Yeah. So you found a lot of traction where the sales cycle is much simpler. Some initial traction, but facing headwinds in the enterprise market. Yeah. And as a founder, does that influence your vision around which targets to market, or is it more?
Yeah, I think it does. It does point towards trying to aim for simpler to sell products, especially if you want to go into the enterprise market. I think PaaS and SaaS platforms are easier to sell to enterprise than something like an infrastructure as a service company. So it does influence my product thinking quite a lot. So whether that is building something so I can sell maybe even to consumers or small organizations, something off the shelf, something that can be just bought as a subscription. I think that it does force me to think more in that direction rather than hoping that I'm going to land a large AI cluster from an enterprise.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me ask you one final question for now. You sit at the intersection of what I see as a few different categories or industries. I might describe you as a sustainability entrepreneur. I might describe you as an infrastructure startup. Obviously, you're in this intersection. I'm wondering if you identify or feel more at home in one or the other, or something else altogether, or if you just don't give a shit how people describe you, you're just doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that is why you don't hear cloud startups being a thing very often, right? It is the very complex intersection of two fields, the infrastructure and the software to enable the purchase of that infrastructure. That is what we do. So yeah, we are an infrastructure company that uses software to sell infrastructure, and that is the core of it. And so we're both, and that is why the cloud market is such a hard market to scale and grow in. It's because you're both.
All right. Final question. Where's your favorite place to go bike riding?
I mean, I don't think anything beats like 9:30 at night in the middle of the summer, biking around the city. The terraces are full. It's good weather. You can bike in your t-shirt. Bike without hands, just chilling out, enjoying the sun. I think that's the best place to bike, best to bike in the world. Amsterdam during a good day doesn't get much better than that.
All right. David Kohnstamm, you can find him at Leaf Cloud. We're biking around in the summer evenings of Amsterdam.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining us, David.
You too.